Hello friends, my name is Shivam from DevOps Schools and I will help you to enable your learning process in various technologies of DevOps, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data and many more. This is our initiative to help you by sharing multiple tutorials and videos. And if you want any specific tutorials or any particular topic, then please do comment in the below comment section and I will help you with it. Also, please subscribe to our premium services on YouTube, which will give you access to more content and videos to enhance your knowledge about all these topics. Also, if you want me to help you with regards to the online trainings and classroom sessions by our qualified trainers, then please do write me at contact@devopsschool.com. Thank you.
If you have that requirements, RDS is not a good choice. If you want to do a lot of customization to your RDBMS, don't do that. Simply go for some NoSQL database. Which will be serve as a sort of a replica database, which will serve for your data for any just in case you want to maintain the durability of your database. RDS read replica will provide enhanced performance and durability of database. It makes it easy to elastically scale out beyond the capacity of your single DB instance. If you have heavy workload replicas, databases you want to scale in and scale out, you can get one or more replica for a given database instance. Read replicas can also be promoted when needed to become standalone database also. Read replicas can be promoted to be as a standalone database. So RDS will provide read replicas for all your databases, and we mentioned earlier that you have different choices of databases here. You can use MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, Amazon Aurora. These are your choices. Okay. Then on DynamoDB, DynamoDB is sort of used for high provision throughput. You can how much provision throughput capacity is required for your reads and writes. So you can write throughput capacity. You can allocate the resource accordingly. DynamoDB allocates the necessary machine resources to meet your throughput needs while ensuring that you get a consistent low latency performance. So there is this 1 unit of read capacity which represents a strongly consistent read per second or 2 eventually consistent read per second for an item of up to 4 KB in size. A unit of read capacity represents 1 strongly consistent read per second or 2 eventually consistent read per second. This is 1 unit. And write capacity is 1 write per second. So these are the units in which your throughput is provisioned in DynamoDB. Let's look at a sample question. Which use case is ideal for Amazon RDS database engine? Select 2. First is complex transactions, shredding, simple get put request and queries, a medium to high write rate and query write rate, RDBMS customizations. So what is the ideal for RDS to use? We spoke about that. You may have complex transactions, and if you have a medium to high query and write rate, you might go for RDS. You don't want to go for that when you want to customize a lot of things on RDBMS. If you have simple get put, also why do you want to go for RDS? If you have a simple get put, go for a NoSQL database, and you don't get sharding in RDS database. Another question, which is which AWS database service is best suited for non-relational database? Redshift, RDS, Glacier, DynamoDB. So Redshift is used for big database application. RDS is relational. Glacier is storage, file storage, and DynamoDB is the left of these choices. So this is how we eliminate. Another question: an application requires a relational database with an initial storage capacity of 4 TB. The database will grow by 100 gigs every day. To support traffic, at least 4 read replicas will be required to handle your reads. Which option will meet your requirements? By the way, it mentions you can just highlight the important clauses here. It is relational, it will grow by 10 gigs and it needs read replicas. So DynamoDB is not relational, S3 is not relational, it's an object storage. Redshift is not relational, it's used for big data. You're left with one relational database, which is Amazon Aurora.
So D
Then
is it?
Yeah, go ahead.
The D is the option is for is it like a NoSQL? I mean Redshift, like a data warehouse means it's not. Was it a NoSQL or was it is a RDBM?
Redshift is big data. It's data warehousing solution.
Or data warehousing is not a RDBMS?
No, it is not. It is not. It may have unstructured data also, right? It's not.
Okay, it's a mix.
Yeah. It's not RDBMS. It's a different. You will have there a different file storage altogether. If you are aware of any big data concept like Hadoop, MapReduce is the algorithm, right? So there you will have different types of file system itself. The file system is different.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So that will be on files mostly. It will not be like database, traditional database.
Thank
you. No problem. Then next concept is on applying caching to improve performance. How do you provide caching to your applications to improve your performance? So the first thing here in this we will look at is your CloudFront. What is CloudFront? It is your CDN. It is global CDN service on Amazon, which delivers data like videos or any media files or any static files. It delivers that to your viewers with a very low latency and high transfer speeds. CloudFront is kind of integrated with AWS physical locations that are directly connected to the global infrastructure. And by the way, CloudFront is available not just on region or AZ, but there are something called as edge locations. If you are aware of this concept of edge locations in AWS, that is good, or else you may want to note that there are there is something called as edge location in AWS global infrastructure. Other than the AZ and your region, edge locations will provide some services which provides a low latency to the users. And CloudFront is one of those edge location services. You may want to check. I will sort of let me show you something on that. AWS edge location. If you're not aware of this, just look at that. What services are available on edge locations? So edge locations will provide this CloudFront as well as DNS, which is your S3. It also provides AWS Wire, what is that? Web Application Firewall, WAF we call it as. There are 4 different services which are available there. So edge location is something which you may want to look at. So CloudFront will work on, is available on edge locations for you. And Yeah, so you get static and dynamic data. You can get the data can be origin from S3, EC2, ELB, or on-prem servers. So these options can origin your data and store it to CloudFront. It provides you this content protection, and there is this security improvement features, AWS Shield and AWS Fire WAF. I told right, Web Application Firewall. This is WAF is Web Application Firewall. So these 4 services are available on your edge location, other than your CloudFront. So how do you use caching in CloudFront? So this is the sort of life cycle of your data in the CloudFront. So end user will request content which has to be stored. So non-cached content is written from the origin. Origin can be S3 bucket or end user. CloudFront edge location data will be transferred to CloudFront edge locations for caching. Then data is transferred to the user. So this cached copies will retain. If it is not there in the S3, it will be fetched and it will be retained here. Any update which happens to your source origin, CloudFront will fetch it and update that for you. So this provides a sort of caching to provide temporary storing of your static data in intermediate location between the permanent storage and the user, like S3 and a user. It makes the future request much faster. For the first request time, it will be little slower. Subsequent requests will be much faster. So if you look at Amazon's shopping site, much of its data, which is static, is stored on CloudFront. All right. Then caching using Amazon's ElastiCache. ElastiCache can significantly improve latency and throughput for many read-heavy application workloads and compute-intensive workloads. ElastiCache simplifies and offloads the management, monitoring, and operation of in-memory cache environments. So you generally use ElastiCache for providing in-memory caching of your application. You might want to store something in memory cache. So this is the solution for you, ElastiCache. So on the left-hand side, I have a solution. I have an architecture which is not having ElastiCache. So at any request, the data is fetched from either of the databases, like MongoDB or DynamoDB or RDS. But if I have an in-memory ElastiCache, the latency is reduced. And this is again one of the managed service in AWS. It enables you to focus on your applications without you to worry about how to manage the caching separately. ElastiCache has 2 flavors, basically two options. One is using Memcache and one is Redis engine. And you can manage that by using AWS Management Console. You can create ElastiCache and you can get rid of the caching maintenance manually. It is compatible with any engine protocol. So most of the client libraries will work with these engines without additional change in the application code. And you will get a lot of monitoring as well if you are using this. And monitoring comes at no extra cost. You only pay for what you use. Okay. So let's look at the 2 options. What is Memcache and what is Redis used for? Memcache is used, it offers a multi-threaded environment, whereas Redis will give you single-threaded option for using cache. So Memcache can be used by more than one CPU cores as well. Whereas Redis, obviously it is single threaded, so you will use one core. Memcache is designed to be simple and requires less maintenance than Redis. It is also easier to scale horizontally. Because it is providing you multi-threaded feature, it can scale horizontally. Whereas you can add more and remove nodes to Memcached clusters. If there is a disaster, you can have a failover on Memcached clusters. Okay. When do you use Memcache? Memcache is preferred when your cache doesn't need the advanced features that Redis provides. So Redis gives you some other atomic operations, and it gives you longer persistence, and it also has this read replica and failover management. Redis supports structuring of data, whereas Memcache is designed to sort of have flat strings. Data in Redis is persistent. You can use it as a primary data store also, whereas Memcache is not persistent. It is sort of in memory, purely in memory. And if memory is, if your application is lost, maybe you can even lose your data if you're not having clusters on that. Redis offers atomic operations, but Memcache doesn't. So it is similar to if you are requiring those atomic operations like you do on your relational databases, that can be choice. So let us look at a sample question. Which of the following objects are good candidates to store in cache? Select three choices. Here, three choices. So there is obviously one wrong answer in that case. Session state, shopping cart, product catalog, and account balance. Which can, yeah, D is wrong because you don't want to store your account balance in cache. Right. Which of the following cache engines are supported by Elasticache? Select two: MySQL, Memcached, Redis, Couchbase. MySQL is relational database, it is not caching. Memcache and Redis are choices. Couchbase is not the right answer.
What is the Couchbase?
Now, Couchbase is a different service which is not managed in AWS. It is also, it provides you the similar in-memory solution, but that is not a managed service in Amazon. So Amazon Elasticache is a managed service. Okay.
What is the difference between the read replica and caching? So is both are similar, or it has different?
No, they are different. No, they are different. They are not similar. Read replica is a sort of entire replica of your database. Read replica can be used as a backup of your database, and your backup can be promoted as a standalone storage also. Read replica can be promoted as a database storage instance also. Whereas Elasticache or any in-memory caching is a simple cache. Caching is used between layers. It is not persistent storage. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Designing solutions for elasticity and scaling. Okay. So for us to understand that, let's move forward. There is a difference between scaling, vertical scaling, and horizontal scaling. Vertical scaling is scaling up and down, which means some specifications of your instance is modified, and you can scale in vertical way up and down. Maybe you are going from a small size instance to a large size instance. T2 micro, you are going from T2 micro to a X large. That is something called as vertical scaling. Vertical scaling will add memories or CPU and CPU at workload as the workload increases. It might reach a limit eventually. All right. It is a vertical scaling is also maybe you must consider the performance also, because when you are using vertical scaling, you might also require a reboot of the server, because if you change the configuration of your server, you will have to restart that server. So that will imply or impact something on your performance. All right. Horizontal scaling will give you a sort of limitless scaling, which will be ideal for your growing workloads. If you are going to rely on horizontal scaling, your application must be designed in that way. Horizontal scaling is it requires a lot of design considerations. You have to design your application to scale horizontally. You may change the number of instances, add, remove instances as needed. That is the benefit you get. Then there is this service on Amazon EC2, which is EC2 auto scaling. Auto scaling will launch or terminate instances for you and allows you to scale your applications automatically. For this auto scaling, you have to specify scaling policies. So Amazon auto scaling can launch and terminate instances as demanded. EC2 auto scaling integrates with ELB. Okay. ELB can be used to integrate auto scaling to enable you to attach one or more load balancers so that your auto scaling can be possible. So auto scaling can launch across different availability zones. After you attach the load balancer, it will automatically register the instances in the group. So for you to have auto scaling, you have to create auto scaling groups. And in that group, you will have the ability to add and remove instances. When one availability zone becomes unhealthy, EC2 auto scaling can launch instances in other availability zone also. So what are the components for auto scaling? So auto scaling has these three components. One is your auto scaling strategy, which means on what decisions you should scale. Let's say you want to have a strategy like every weekend I should have two extra servers. That's your strategy. Okay. Or you want to say at the noon of a day, I will not have search in my application. I may reduce servers. That is your strategy. So you need auto scaling strategy. You need auto scaling group and auto scaling plan. Strategies and plan can sort of coincide. So auto scaling works with EC2 auto scaling groups, EC2 services. You can also have database clusters which can auto scale. AWS auto scaling uses EC2 auto scaling and application auto scaling services to configure scaling policies with high availability and cost optimization. These policies contain metrics and thresholds that are calculated by AWS to scale horizontally. Okay, so you have to specify the metrics and thresholds. If you have created some auto scaling plan, you might remember that you will provide some metrics like what should be your initial size, what should be your desired capacity, and what should be your maximum capacity. Minimum capacity, desired capacity, and maximum capacity. You specify that when you create your auto scaling plan. And you can have one scaling plan per application. Yeah, that's something which is important to know, that you will have one scaling plan. Right. So auto scaling versus EC2 auto scaling. Right. AWS autoscaling manages scaling for multiple resources across multiple services, whereas EC2 autoscaling works only on EC2 instances only. So you should use AWS autoscaling to manage scaling for multiple resources across multiple services. Okay. AWS autoscaling lets you define dynamic scaling policies for multiple EC2 autoscaling groups also, or other resources using predefined scaling strategies. Use AWS autoscaling to configure scaling policies for all scalable resources in your application. AWS autoscaling can work for all scalable resources. So you can define database instances also if you want to scale. It is easier. Sorry.
Can you provide the examples of AWS auto scaling? Like what are the services and when that happens, like a use case?
Use cases like you see, this EC2 auto scaling is limited to EC2 only. But AWS auto scaling can span across different services. Like you can scale your database instances. You might want to add new database instances. You might want to, let's say you are spinning up MySQL database. And so for that, you need to define one DB instance. Now, if your application is growing and your requirements are growing, you may want to grow your backend database instances also, DB instances. So at that point, you will use AWS autoscaling.
Thank you.
So there are these two things. You have to understand this. Maybe you may want to refer the documentation in the AWS console, which helps you understand more about how you can configure the policies and all.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Other than that, AWS autoscaling will, other than just scaling, it will also look at the metrics, health metrics and all. So you have bigger control if you are using that. You can create good strategies. So AWS autoscaling in conjunction with your CloudWatch will give you a very strong triad of services. A combination of that CloudWatch and this will sort of help you to scale based on metrics, health metrics. We are talking about that in slides in future. So yeah, Amazon CloudWatch. Using CloudWatch. So what is CloudWatch? Basically, it's a service that provides monitoring for AWS resources. It provides monitoring into different metrics, like what is the resource utilization, what is the CPU utilization, what is operational performance, and overall environment security. A lot of things can be monitored. CloudWatch will capture and store metrics to AWS resources. Other than that, you can create your own metrics also in your application. You can say, I want to create my own custom metrics, custom log files, something which you want to do regularly from your application. So those metrics can be monitored using CloudWatch. Okay. ELB automatically distributes incoming application traffic across multiple targets. We know that we saw that earlier. So ELB can work across some Amazon EC2 instances as well as containers. If you have Docker containers, that also can be used with ELBs. ELB can handle different loads of your application traffic in a single availability zone or across multiple availability zone. So using ELB will give you fault tolerance for your applications.
Please enroll our general membership for $399 plan to get access of all the parts. Along with that, you can access our other tutorials such as Docker, Ansible, Jenkins, Terraform, Splunk, AWS, Azure, and various other DevOps related premium tutorials with our channel membership. If you would have any issues with our channel membership, you can drop an email to us at contact@devopsschool.com, or you can also unsubscribe from channel membership anytime if you don't want to continue or did not like the video. To get our channel membership, click onto the join button, select the 3D99 plan and grow your skills immensely. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries. We will reply to them at the earliest. Thanks for watching.